Fast fashion has a major environmental cost, from carbon emissions to water usage to waste. In fact, the fashion industry produces 10% of all global carbon emissions. The alternative is called slow fashion, a movement that approaches fashion mindfully. An approach where clothing is produced in much smaller batches and with both the environment and people in mind. Today, I speak with Sumedhaa Kothari, who decided to create a slow fashion line called By.Sume. Sumedhaa's approach to fashion is unique because she upcycles old materials and turns them into new individual pieces. Sumedhaa's business model is also unique. To keep the cost of the pieces affordable, customers rent them out for a low monthly price. Not only does this reduce waste, but also it makes slow fashion within reach for any budget. This episode is about disrupting yet another industry that's ready for change. I hope you enjoy it. Hey, Sumedhaa, thanks so much for joining the Sustainability Champions podcast. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here.
So the way I like to start these conversations is going a bit high level and kind of doing the elevator pitch, if you will, on what is By.Sume.
By.Sume is an approach to providing sustainable, handmade, upcycled clothing at affordable and accessible prices. The way in which I have endeavored to do this is by renting out these unique one-of-one pieces at affordable prices with the mission to undercut fast fashion. I think one of the biggest opportunities in slow fashion is providing the opportunity to people to have expressive, unique, individualistic style, but at fast fashion prices. Currently, slow fashion and sustainable fashion focuses on capsule pieces within a wardrobe, and it is what consumers still look to fast fashion to correct is the trend pieces. So, what I am working to build is not just a way to do this for my brand as a sustainable designer, but to do this for all independent sustainable designers in order to create a sustainable business model, no pun intended. The biggest challenge for designers is, of course, pricing their pieces at a price point in which they can continue to sustain what they are creating. And unfortunately, this means oftentimes pricing things so high that not only is it not approachable for those who participate in the disposable clothing marketplace, but it is only accessible to people of a certain socioeconomic status that might buy a piece and only wear it one time, and it will still continue to sit in their closet because there is no pressure, so to speak, to actually continue to use the sustainable item of clothing in a sustainable way. And so really the crux of what I've started to build and am continuing to build is just a brand new business model, one that does not change consumer behavior and does not attempt to, but does attempt to create a new offering by which designers can generate enough money and earn an unlimited amount of revenue on a single item of clothing while allowing consumers to access it at a price point that they would be comfortable with.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool. And there's a lot of different things I want to talk about here. But I guess if we just start by approaching what I think is the big challenge that you're looking to solve with all of these different elements that you're talking about, and that's fast fashion. So if we just take a step back and again, starting kind of bigger picture before diving in, if we just take a look at fast fashion, first of all, let's just start with the definition. What is fast fashion? And then why is it such a problem?
So fast fashion is a somewhat newer invention in the past couple of decades by which companies are putting out styles by the hundreds of thousands each season or each year in order to continue to have people engage with buying fashion, buying clothing because of how quickly styles and trends change. So back in the day, we used to have two seasons of clothing, so to speak. And this is what the big design houses would design for. And so if you didn't buy something immediately, that's fine. You still had 5 more months to buy it. But what has now changed psychologically is by pumping out so many new styles and designs and accelerating the pace at which the desire to have something new and different continues to increase. We see consumer behaviors now shift towards constantly wanting and needing newer things. So even in the last 15 years, the average person is buying 60% more clothing compared to previously. And of course, the ramifications of this, in order to supply that level of demand, is to make things that are cheaper with worse quality, less high thread count fabrics, and less sturdy stitching. And so I think people are all very familiar with the fact that a lot of their pieces now degrade a lot quicker, the seams rip quicker, therefore also fulfilling this psychological aspect of clothing becoming disposable. Um, and there's a big part of that, which is quite a fallacy because our clothing has not become any more biodegradable. In fact, it's become less in a lot of ways. We use a lot more polyester, which is derived from oils. And there's huge aspects and components of the ecological impact of this waste that is only growing, that is really only created through the advent of fast fashion.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think this and it's very tempting, like you were saying, you go into a store and you see a $5 t-shirt or sometimes even less. And it looks good and it's fine and you just buy it. It's so easy, and I guess that's great for the consumer, just easy fashion. But I guess to your point of these changes in seasons, I remember reading about this a little while ago that there are some fast fashion brands that now, in theory, technically, the way they change their designs, they have like, I think it's like 26 or even in some cases 52 seasons per year. Basically every week or two, they have a whole new line, and
Yes.
whatever wasn't sold pretty much just gets thrown away because they're never going to use it again. And
Yes.
and I mean, I guess it's great for the economy because they're constantly pumping out new stuff, buying things, making stuff, but the amount of waste that ends up happening from the supply chain, from the entire supply chain, whether it's actually creating the textiles that gets thrown away and all the resources there, plus the actual waste itself that is sitting in a landfill, these heaps of unused clothes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of things that are really horrifying. I think people really tend to understand the environmental impact of cars, for instance, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of shifting behaviors around driving electric. But I think the interesting thing about fashion, it carries a bit of a frivolous, I think, like value case or identifier. And so I think that we just know less about it. But something that is really, really horrifying, it has more or contributes more CO2 emissions than all of shipping and aviation combined. So we think about, where do you want to create impact? Yes, it's really nice to want and have a Tesla, but your pair of jeans took 2,000 gallons of water to create. If you could find a way to save them, it's a lot less effort and a lot more impact.
Yeah, really good point. And so on that, what exactly does upcycled mean?
So upcycling is similar to recycling. They both have the similar cycling route in them.
Mhm.
However, one means to turn something into a higher value good, and that's upcycling, versus recycling means to break something down into its components for reuse. So one just means cycling it up into something else that you can then continue to use, and the other one is breaking it down. Um, Upcycling is something that is not just with clothing. I think a lot of people don't realize they upcycle things all the time. So if you've ever used a jar to put your pens in, you're upcycling. If you've ever used like a wine bottle as a candlestick holder or a vase, you're upcycling. So that's just a little conceptual behind what upcycling is.
So what you're suggesting, and thanks for that definition. What you're doing when you say that By.Sume is creating sustainable, handmade, upcycled pieces. What you're saying is you're taking and yeah, correct me here, but it sounds like you're taking something else, like pieces that were fabric or something that was going to be thrown away, and you're finding a much better use for it and turning it into something better.
Yes.
And so,
100%.
yeah,
Sorry.
I was just going to say, can you share more about what that is and how it works?
Absolutely. So it is, I think typically when it comes to clothing, most popularly known as taking items of clothing that already exist, cutting them up, resewing them into a different item of clothing that you'll actually wear. And I think tied within that, there's the challenge component behind it. So I love to take clothing that is really damaged and really worn, because the challenge in that of cutting out those worn spots and preserving the bits of fabric that can be reused is really, really, really enlivening. There's upcycling that ranges anywhere from like buying things from Goodwill, so clothes that are very lightly worn or may have never been worn at all,
Hmm.
to kind of like that other end. But to your point, for me, it is not just clothes. I actually love to find a whole smattering of things that might be wasted or thrown away or contribute to landfills or contribute to waste, and try to upcycle them into clothing as well. So I think that that's probably one of the things that sets By.Sume apart the most,
Do
is
you have an
that
example of that?
yeah, I wish that I had fewer, but I have so many.
Or like what's one example, maybe one of your more recent ones or one of your favorites that you've used that's not clothing that you've turned into a piece of clothes?
One of the most recent ones is we had a bunch of grocery bags, and I just thought to myself, like, the amount of volume that storing these grocery bags takes up is so tremendous. If there's a way for me to turn it into something waterproof and cool and fun, and the issue with plastic bags, when you put them on your skin, it's not breathable and it's going to stick to your skin. It's going to feel very uncomfortable, which I only know because I have actually made a dress out of plastic before. And so what I then started to figure out is, can I sew this plastic at the seams, try to create a net from it? Actually, when I sewed that plastic, it created a perforation by which then it just pulls apart. And so it's kind of like having like a Scantron, or, you rip off
Mhm.
the like little ends of like a spiral notebook. It's just like a perforated line. So it actually had no integrity. In fact, what it did was create this like vector of force that allowed it to split at the seams way too easily. So it was fun to figure out. And I actually ended up finding that I could melt it together, which created a much higher integrity seam. And so that's just part of the exploration of what I love to do. I think like upcycling inherently is creativity, it's science, it's engineering, and it's just finding a novel way to kind of make something out of nothing. So with this in particular, I ended up like enclosing the plastic bags within swaths of fabric to create a more stiff fabric that I could then create a very structured piece out of. And there's actually products on the market that do this. It's called interfacing, which I didn't know. I've only ever taken one sewing class, so that's part of the fun. But I was able to create interfacing with plastic grocery bags. And so it's a really fun output.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's, and you're describing it now, especially considering you've only taken one sewing class and yet you are a fashion designer. It sounds like you're using a lot of your background in engineering and other areas to find unique ways and unique methods of actually design. And I know that that's something that's important to you. So can you share a little bit more about that philosophy as an approach to your work?
Absolutely. So, yes, I have a degree in cognitive neuroscience, and I actually started my career in tech. And so, through those life experiences and transitioning into engineering, something that I have always valued and respected is the scientific method. It's very much, can I do this? Can I try it? I think what's beautiful about science is that you cannot have science without having doubt. And I think one of the things we shy away from in society is doubt. We don't like to not know what we don't know. And so I think that background has actually been really liberating with something like clothing design, because it's allowed me to go, there's so much doubt here. We'll throw everything at the wall to figure it out. And there's been a lot that I do. I think like painting with soap or setting leaves and resin that I want to preserve and then trying to sew with them has allowed me to test a bunch of things that you would never ever be encouraged to do in a classroom environment with a sewing machine. So I think that that's crucial in the sense of reminding us and liberating us that, be it upcycling or any type of design or any type of kind of pursuit in which you feel less qualified, that actually can be a benefit and that actually can be your greatest strength. And that's worth having courage in, especially when it comes to something like this.
Yeah, I think that's a really good message. And, whether it's fashion or any other endeavor, I think, yeah, that word courage is important, especially because at the beginning, when you're a beginner with anything, you'll probably look stupid because you don't know what you're doing. You're
Yeah.
figuring it out, but everyone's been there. That's the thing, is everyone's gone through that. And it's very sad to see people give up because they feel stupid when they're just getting started, but that's
Yeah.
just like, people look stupid when they first started walking, but you
Yes.
know we're fine.
And that's also the most fun thing to overcome. I actually um stream, so to speak, my entire process on my stories. And every single time I make something, there is a part of the process where it is very embarrassing. And I go, we're going to try this. And it doesn't work. And overcoming that with an audience of people and reminding us all that, like, when it doesn't work, that's the fun. That's where you get to figure it out. That's where you get that, like, little, like, existential reward of I got to challenge and push myself, that I think we have opportunities to do all the time in our day to day. But doing it in arenas like this, you get to just do it for yourself. And so even if you're not live streaming it, I think it's just an important, and for me, very rewarding part of life. Just do it for yourself. See if you can figure it out.
Absolutely. And moving to the other side of what you were talking about in terms of the type of impact that you're looking to make with
Yeah.
By.Sume is changing the business model of fashion. And you mentioned that what you're looking to do is create affordable pieces that are at fast fashion prices. As we've discussed, fast fashion, we didn't like go deep into it, but fast fashion is inherently extremely inexpensive, and that's what makes it so kind of addictive and easy. But what your approach to it is by renting out your pieces. And so can you share a little bit more about how that business model works, and if someone wanted a piece from By.Sume, what they would actually need to do, and how it works?
100%. So I think that fortunately, everything is time and place. I think we live in a time where a lot of the workflows that are necessary to have something like this exist, people are already very comfortable with. So buying online, people are already very comfortable with shopping for things online that they've never tried on before,
Right.
as well as shipping and posting and receiving packages. I think with the advent of Amazon, we've all gotten very comfortable with, like, okay, I have to go to the post office and return an item. And so that's what feels particularly lucky about the setup for this. But to kind of speak more to why it exists, how it came to be, I actually never intended to become an entrepreneur nor a fashion designer, and I think that that's how all stories probably start in some capacity. I was volunteering at a homeless shelter, and this was at the end of the year. They actually were running out of their budget, because that's what happens with these organizations. They get a yearly budget, and if they do a really good job and serve a lot of people, they then run out of money. And so it became exciting for me to use this new skill to say, let me raise some money and sell some of my pieces. And of course, when you're doing market research and trying to figure out, okay, what do you sell these pieces at, a sustainable handmade upcycled piece of clothing, and you consider all of these inputs, I had friends in marketing, et cetera. It's a pretty high price point. And even then, setting it somewhat below that price point, there's an expectation that, okay, great, there's a lot of demand for this, it will fly off the shelves. And it didn't. And I think that was really exciting. Again, like the failure, that's the fun part because that's where you get to figure something out. So we got to have all these conversations with my peers, and I'm super fortunate that at least like a lot of who I am surrounded by, they don't massively struggle. There's a lot of struggle in this world, but the ones who were not able to afford these pieces were not the ones that were actually in a financial position of struggle. It was the consumer behavior. It was the behavior of, well, I don't spend more than $30 to $50 for a top. And yes, yours is cool, but I don't spend that. And so that was the jumping off point of, okay, well, any and all designers, especially all the ones I have met in LA that do independent design and a lot of upcycle design, they'd never be able to sell their pieces for that. And unfortunately, that means that then either they no longer get to design sustainable clothing, which is really important for the environment, but also it means that if they were to do it and price it super high again, it's never ever going to be accessible to people who participate in the fast fashion ecosystem. And so the idea, which was to be able to rent out these pieces, basically took the form of renting them out on a monthly basis for somewhere between $20 to $50. I know that at the time of this airing, that's going to make sense, but maybe in 20 years, that number will mean nothing. But for everyone in 20 years, that's kind of like what fast fashion goes for. And to have no due date or deadline, I know a lot of companies currently that do rentals, they do in such a way that you book out your rental, and that is at the benefit of the company because it helps them plan their inventory. They know where their pieces will be. I think what was important is, as an independent designer, what you generally care most about is just giving people access to your pieces. And I think in the consumer behavior of fast fashion, people don't know when they're going to want to wear them. It might be tomorrow, it might be next Tuesday. And so giving people an unlimited type of subscription model to like one piece of clothing for as long as they'd like, and there's no set time or due date and they can return it back, serves both purposes very successfully. And I think something that's also important that came out of an extension from this is, how do I do this not just for me and my pieces, but for all designers? The ultimate goal is, and what I'm currently working on, is creating a platform for all independent designers like myself to have full ownership of their inventory and be able to upload them for rent, and serve the customers again with no additional workflow. All independent designers already do their own fulfillment and shipping. We run to the post office and send our pieces. So a lot of the operational costs that come with business models like Rent the Runway, which is labor and fulfillment, it doesn't exist on this platform. It just is a way for designers to have access to consumers and consumers to have access to designers. And I think the best part about it is one of the second highest operational costs for business models like Rent the Runway is depreciation of products. And so someone damages a Valentino something, Rent the Runway is not going to be able to restore that to its full original quality. They don't have those in-house designers. But with something like this, the pieces come back to the designers, and the designers were the ones who created them, and they can fix them, they can make them better, they can make them different. So in so many different ways, it just reduces the amount of waste that we generate. And really, I think just serves all parties. So that's the model.
It's super cool. And so just to clarify, people can rent out a piece for as long as they want?
As long as they want. And one of the cool things is, I think because people are so price sensitive, the ones who are engaging most with these platforms, there's an element to this where if a piece would have cost you $200 and you're renting it for $20 a month, the end of 10 months, that piece is yours to keep because you have paid what you would have paid for that. So,
gotcha. So you're right. So you are, it really is renting it because you have a monthly cost, and the consumer can keep it or they can return it whenever. And yeah, per month that makes sense. Okay. I had this, for some reason, when I was listening, I thought it's $20 and then you can keep it for as long as you want. I'm like,
oh,
that doesn't make sense. Yeah,
I'm
but the
glad that you
monthly,
clarified because people will be
yeah,
way too excited when they come to the site.
yeah. Yeah, but the monthly cost makes a lot of sense, and I think that's a really cool thing. Where if the cost of if you were to sell it and we're going to sell it for $200, then the cost of the
Right.
product, then yeah, when if you've rented it for $10 for 10 months at $20 a month, then it's yours to keep because you've paid the cost of the product, or the
Exactly.
piece rather. Well, that's very cool, and I think that's a unique way to do it. And it also, as you said, it's better for the consumer because it allows the consumer to, like, if you really love the piece as the consumer and you don't want to give it back, you have the option of keeping it until you own it.
Mhm.
Whereas if you don't like it, or you realize actually, I'm going to wear it a couple times and then I'm sort of done, then you have the option to give it back. And like you said, it reduces the amount of waste. But it's also, I'm just thinking out loud as I'm processing this approach. It also allows you to, as the consumer, you start realizing like, oh, I want to keep this piece from this designer, so I'm going to go back and see what else they have, and you kind of
Right.
can support specific designers based on how long you choose to keep stuff.
I think that one of the biggest challenges with current clothing rental is the pieces are out of style. And with something like this, like you said, you have access to such a broader range of designers. Independent designers are doing really cool things in ways that they have no rules where designers in-house would. And so, especially being in LA, seeing what I have seen, being a girl who's born and raised in Seattle, mind you, my mind has been blown about the levels of expression that one can have when wearing cool clothing. And I think, of course, like when we think about fashion, we think, okay, it's fashion, that's a luxury. Why? Who cares? Again, someone coming from STEM, something I've come to realize is as we continue to progress in the world, the way we show up carries more and more importance in ways that I think we all know subconsciously, but it's still kind of hard for us to reconcile. I mean, we are constantly seeing and being seen. And with social media, with virtual meetings, just the ability to have yourself represented in the best way that you want to just has become increasingly more exciting, if not important. And so I think, when we think about these things like, oh, great, I'll have access to the latest, coolest things. Sure, it might sound fun, but I think that inherently we already try to do that. We already try to access that. We already hearken for that, which is why we participate in fast fashion, whether we want to admit it or not. And so, yeah, I think that there's an element of us kind of, instead of working so hard, working smart with how we choose to show up. And I think that this is one of those ways we can do it.
What is next for By.Sume? You've mentioned this amazing platform connecting consumers with designers for rent, and I mean, this sounds like a huge project, and a really exciting one that can really bring a lot of empowerment to small designers and to consumers who are looking for unique and individualistic pieces that are not too hard on the environment. So that's one thing you're doing. Are there other exciting areas that you're focusing on and looking forward to?
Well, that is the primary meat on the bone, so to speak, of what I am focused on. It is something that is far greater of an undertaking than I think even I could have imagined coming from both Google and Stripe, just the payment flows involved and being able to facilitate something like that. Having someone have a single checkout cart that then downstream pays a bunch of different designers. It will take a lot of work, and I think it's important to do it well because, as you outlined with fast fashion, it's easy. If something like this isn't done well, it won't be easy, and it won't be a solution. And so I think even that undertaking is going to be, several months to several years really to perfect. But what I would really love to do, and this was a brilliant idea provided to me by someone who also has a brand, is that with everything that I learn, and this is why I share everything on my story so much, um, there's an opportunity to teach other independent designers. And so when we create a platform on which designers can showcase their pieces, is there other ways for them to figure out who their audience is, who cares about what they create, to kind of go through those learnings of what it means to not just be a designer, but also a business owner, because that has been very challenging for me. And I think that those are not mutually, I think that those are mutually exclusive in a lot of ways. And
Mm.
so I think that there's a lot that I would love to teach. I think that there's a lot that I'd love to collaborate with in terms of other designers, universities, scientists. But the primary focus is taking what I'm building for my brand, collecting enough data on it that I know what works and what doesn't,
Mhm.
and then collaborating and building hand in hand with other designers to create an unbelievable platform.
That's awesome. And best of luck. I mean, I think it sounds like an amazing opportunity, both from a business point of view, as we were just talking about, because yeah, finding these kind of designers, I would imagine is a huge pain point for people who are looking for, a design house that has one or two people. So the opportunity there is amazing. And also from an environmental perspective, I mean, the fact that you're encouraging renting, and as we were talking about, it really reduces the environmental impact. It's fantastic. So for anyone who's, I know it's very early on in your stages for this platform, but for people who are interested in learning about By.Sume and seeing some of your pieces, maybe renting them out and getting a feel of what it's like to go for this really slow fashion, very custom and unique approach, where's the best place for people to go and learn about it?
So for the rentals or to buy, By.Sume.com. But I am most active on Instagram, which is at by.sume. And I think that what I have come to value the most is this collaboration feedback loop. I've been very upfront throughout this process. I don't care to build something for me, I care to build something that's right. And
Mm.
so that means that it has to be of service and it has to be in service. And that's not going to happen without people telling me how to best serve them. So please, please, please be communicative and come hang out and yeah, come watch the stories, see all the faux pas and laugh with me. And those are probably the best places. I also have a YouTube channel and a TikTok that are also at by.sume. So yeah.
Nice. Well, Sumedhaa, thank you so much for your time. And yeah, it'd be fun to watch you go through this process and learn as you create your pieces and keep exploring the opportunities that you're finding with unique materials and unique approaches to actually designing the fashion pieces that you end up renting out on your website. So thanks so much for your time and for going through this. I think the way that you're approaching it is fantastic, and the impact that you're having, especially once your platform comes out, will be hopefully it'll disrupt the industry to a certain degree. It sounds like that's the direction you're moving in. So I wish it for you to work, and hopefully soon, because like you said, fast fashion has a big impact, and you're doing something about it. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.